Hey guys, it's Darwin and yep, I'm going back to the stove. So if you've been following along on my channel for at least the past 2 years, you'll know that typically on the trail, I'm a cold soaker. Yep, typically I prefer cold mushy couscous over a hot meal, basically out of pure laziness. Well, my friends, the day has finally come when I'm ready to throw my old Talenti jar to the curb and pick up the trusty old stove again. Now, to be fair, over the past 3 years, I only really go stoveless about 90% of the time. I used a stove on my 2018 through hike of the Pinhoti Trail. I used a stove again later that year on my bike tour of the Blue Ridge Parkway. And recently, I took a stove and a full cook system over to Scotland for my TGO challenge. So I guess I never really went 100% stoveless. Recently, I decided to start carrying a cook system on all of my hikes in the foreseeable future and some of the bike packing trips that I have coming up. Why am I going to start carrying a stove again? Why did I ditch the cold soaking? Why not? I think it's good to switch things up every once in a while, and you can only eat so much cold soaked couscous, not just couscous, cold soaked couscous, because I'll still eat it hot. But you can only eat so much cold soaked food before you just kind of get burnt out, and I like to switch it up every once in a while, so I decided to go back to a cook system. And making the decision to go back to a stove got me thinking I've never really done a full video on different types of cook systems. I've done little reviews on the BRS and certain cook pots, but I've never just talked about stoves. So there's a bunch of different stoves and cook systems on the market, from white gas to canister stoves to alcohol to wood burning stoves, and I've dabbled in just about all of them. But today I wanted to talk about the 3 main cook systems that I've used the most over my backpacking career. So number 1 is the type of stove that I was first introduced to when I was a kid and getting into the outdoors and camping, and that's a white gas stove. Now, the first stove I ever used in the outdoors was my mom's classic 2-burner Coleman pump stove. You guys know the one. It looks like a suitcase, it's green, gotta pump the little thing. And we basically used that every single weekend that we went car camping. But the first backpacking stove that I ever used on the trail when I was in Scouts was the MSR Whisper Lite. Now, this guy is a classic, and this is actually my original one that I've had for quite some time. Just like the Coleman, it uses white gas, which is basically like a petroleum-based liquid, kind of like gasoline. So you put the white gas in one of these little pump bottles, you hook up the hose, you pump it a handful of times, the fuel goes through the line, vaporizes, and turns into fire. Presto, you have a stove. Now, obviously, as you can tell, it's a pretty bulky, heavy system, but it's a classic. It's been around for a really long time, but it's definitely got some weight to it. And typically, with the size of the burner, you would use something like one of these big MSR kettles. Now, you can cook for yourself and like 5 other people because it's such a massive system. Now, with all the ultralight backpacking stoves out on the market, why would I still have this, and why would somebody use this? Well, white gas can still burn at sub-zero temperatures, which means it is excellent and super efficient if you're doing high altitude snow camping, which is why it's so popular with a bunch of climbers and mountaineers, and why MSR still makes this guy. So I keep my old Whisper Lite around just in case I get a wild hair at my ass one day and I want to get into mountaineering, which probably won't happen because, let's be honest, I hate hiking in snow. But still, this was my first backpacking stove. The second type of cook system that I used in my backpacking career is one that most people use for the first time on the trail, and that is the JetBoil system. Now, over the years, I've had a couple different models, and the JetBoil is actually what I started my hike of the AT with in 2015. A lot of people use them because, number 1, they are super efficient on fuel. They boil water really fast, and it's a system, which means that the burner and the cup and the little fuel can and everything fits right down and nestles inside of this mug. And there's a couple different cook systems like this, like the MSR reactor, but I think the JetBoil is definitely the most popular. And like I said, I think the reason why people use these and why I started using them is because they are super efficient on fuel. So if you're at higher elevation, it takes longer to boil water, and these get the job done a little bit quicker, which again is why they're so popular for climbers and people that are into mountaineering. So what is the reason that I still hold on to my JetBoil and the reason I still have this guy? Well, it's mainly because of coffee. So you can actually use a coffee press with it, and I keep it around so I can make a fresh cup of coffee in my van when I'm out traveling, and that's basically it. It's been a long time since I've used a JetBoil on the trail, just because, like I said, I think it's a little bit of overkill for typically what I do. So I was on the AT and the JetBoil just seemed like too much, and that's when I made my switch to my third and final cook system, which is the pocket canister stove. Now there are a ton of different little pocket stoves on the market, with the MSR Pocket Rocket probably being the most famous, but the first stove that I switched to was the Snow Peak Lite Max. Now for anybody out there that is new to stoves and don't really know how these work, really simple. Just like the JetBoil, they use an ISO fuel can. So it's isobutane in here. And you can get little cans, you can get big cans. It simply just screws right onto the bottom. You put your cup on top. You turn the valve, you light it, and boom, you got a cook system. So super compact, super easy, and it's nice because, you know, you can use different size pots with it. You can put a little frying pan on it, and like they're called, it is a pocket stove. It fits very small inside of your pocket or your pack, and really efficient to have on the trail. And the cook pot that I switched to when I went to this over the JetBoil was the Snow Peak 700 titanium mug. Now I have had this guy for a long time. I think I picked this up in 2014 before I even did the AT, and then had this sent to me. As you can see, it's kind of charred. I've set it on fire. I've used it on this type of stove. I've actually used it on a JetBoil. This guy has been around the block. And for me, 700 milliliters is more than enough for anything that I cook on the trail, from north sides to mashed potatoes to even hot couscous. This is my go-to mug, and the one that I've used more than any other cook system or any other pot that I own. So the Snow Peak Lite Max was and still is a great stove, but these days I typically use the BRS Ultralight. I picked this guy up back in 2017 on a whim off of Amazon, super cheap, did a review, and I love it. It's typically the stove that I reach for and the one that I probably hike with the most. Even on the PCT last year when I was going stoveless, I carried this guy through the Sierra just in case I needed a hot meal. And for the foreseeable future, and all of my hikes that I have coming up soon, I'll be using the BRS and my trusty old 700 titanium mug. Perfect cook system, super lightweight, and really easy to use. Now, aside from those main cook systems, I get a ton of questions about alcohol stoves and wood-burning stoves, and I have used those in the past, but to be fair, I don't really have enough information and enough time using those in the field, so I don't want to really give my opinion about those. Plus, I tend to hike in a lot of really dry areas that have fire burns, and I don't trust alcohol or wood-burning stoves just because I don't have a little valve that I can turn off. What cook system are you currently using on the trail? Do you have a trusty old piece of gear that you can't get on the trail without? Leave me something down below and let us know your thoughts. If you found any value in this video, go ahead and hit that like button. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And as always, guys, thanks for watching.